Get started in a moment. Everybody can, once you get seated. My name is Ron Halper. I'm the director of the Jewish. Everybody can please. Thanks. My name is Ron Halper. I'm director of the Jewish Community Relations Council of Greater Washington. And thank you for joining this evening, which we think is going to be an extraordinary talk, an extraordinary conversation. The Jewish Community Relations Council is the public affairs and community relations arm of the Jewish community throughout the region. We represent over 100 institutions, including this one here. And we focus on four things: government relations, Israel advocacy, social justice, and interfaith work. And today, obviously, we're focusing on what has been on everyone's mind this weekend, and Israel, and the fact that we're commemorating the legacy of Yitzhak Rabin, who was gunned down 20 years ago this week. We wanted to bring, before I go any further, I want to thank Noah Meir. Noah, where are you?
Here.
Noah, for her extraordinary work over the last 4 days in putting together an incredible program on behalf of the Jewish community. They have put more mileage on that car, and the member of Knesset is doing 14 speaking engagements in 5 days. So let's just give her a round of applause. I also want to note Alexis Schwartz, right in front, who also, as the Deputy Director of our Israel Action Center, has worked so hard, as well as the rest of the staff. Julie Greenwald on our staff, you saw, who greeted you at the desk. So we wanted to bring someone who really knew who really knew the Prime Minister. And we're lucky today, actually, that we happen to have two people who knew the former Prime Minister. And we wanted to be able to talk about what was Rabin's legacy, and when his life ended so too early, what was he imagining for the state of Israel internally, and also with relations to her neighbors. So first, we are lucky to have with us today, privileged actually, member of Knesset Nachmias Verbin, who was an assistant to Rabin when he was the head of the Labor Party and as Prime Minister, and after the assassination became the Director General of Shalom Chaverim, which was established to promote dialogue in Israel. She was elected to the Knesset in March of 2015 and as a member of the House Committee, the Economics Committee, and chair of the Israel Industry Committee, which you would understand if you understand her previous background in the private sector, and chair of the Israel Family Committee. We're also privileged to have with us another political confidant of Yitzhak Rabin, Professor Yoram Pari from the University of Maryland. He is the director of the Joseph and Alma Gildenhorn Center for Israel Studies, a former political advisor to Prime Minister Rabin, a former professor of sociology and communication at Tel Aviv University, and former editor-in-chief of the Israeli newspaper Devar. So again, thank you everyone for joining us here. I hope you all had a good Shabbat. And now it's my pleasure to turn the floor over to you.
So, this is Shabbat, and 20 years ago, and we are now on November, I really did lose count of days.
6th.
So it's November 6th. So on the Shabbat, a bit similar to that. To Shabbat similar to that, almost, on November 4th actually. Yitzhak Rabin has left his house to what he did not know at that time would be his last public appearance, his last event in life. Atmosphere in Israel before the big rally, in which by the end he was assassinated, was very, very difficult, was very, very heavy. He suffered from terrible incitement, terrible sedition, just for the pure fact that he had enough courage to proceed with something that a few years before that was even unperceivable, and that is to approach the Palestinians, to reach out and maybe try to get to any kind of settlement. He well knew, as being Mr. Security of Israel, and the real Mr. Security of Israel, he knew that it is a long process, that we need milestones, that it is not something, a bit similar even to the agreement with Egypt that 13 years before that was signed on the same lawn in the White House. But that was with the country. And we are speaking about people who at that point have no institutions. I keep saying, I keep trying to recall and to understand why the Palestinians are in the situation they are, in almost regardless for the fact that I think that we should have gone through with a process, or at least switch to another process, which will bring on about some kind of an agreement. Yitzhak Rabin didn't want to rally, in spite of the incitement, in spite of the terrible demonstrations against him. He didn't want to rally. He was afraid. He was afraid for two reasons. He was afraid that people would not come, and he was afraid because there was some intelligence information that, God forbid, a terror attack will happen there. It did not cross his mind that he will be assassinated at the end of this rally. And at the rally, he spoke about the weakening democracy because of the incitement that was going on in the streets. Can you imagine the beginning of the 1990s in Israel? Israel at that point is a country, still developing country, very, very young economy. 1 million Jews coming from the old Soviet Union, living in trailers, no houses, no housing for them. Most of the people that have jobs are within the center of the country, not in the Negev and the Galilee. So we are suffering from a problem that we are still facing today, and that is the issue of equal opportunities. We are after the Iraq War, the first Iraq War, which made Rabin understand very clearly that the next war is not a war about, you will not be able to win it with just infantry and armored corps. He understands that the next war is with missiles. And I think that had a huge effect on him. Fall of 1991, Yitzhak Rabin is beginning his campaign to be re-elected. Not re-elected because he was before, but re-elected because since 1977 he has not been able to retake the harness in the Labour Party and to take the reins, and is going about against Shimon Peres, and that's when I would join him. At that point, I'm not sure you know that, not many young people were supporting Yitzhak Rabin. Most of the young people were supporting Shimon Peres because they were very tempted by what is called the Shimon Peres' vision for the new Middle East. Whereas Rabin was always perceived as more pragmatic. He was Minister of Defense, even though he was Prime Minister before that. He wasn't considered to be, would you agree with that? He was not considered to be necessarily a man of a vision. And I thought he had a very, very clear vision, and he had a plan, he had a program for Israel. He knew what he wanted to execute. And I keep saying to people, it took me many, many years to decide that I'm actually taking the plunge and joining the Israeli politics and joining the Knesset. And I'm telling a story, which my husband and Noah and Ron have already heard, and Alexis have already heard, but still it's a nice story about what it means to be a politician. In the fall of 1991, we are running around the country trying to convince members of the Labour Party to vote for Yitzhak Rabin. And on Shabbat, it was Shabbat, very, very cold Shabbat, I remember it very, very clearly, and we were arriving in Haifa, in the middle of the Carmel, on Mount Carmel, and we were arriving at one of our branches, and Yitzhak Rabin, we were opening the door, you're expecting like to move people around. 4 people were waiting for him. And he was sitting there and giving them his lecture and his vision like there were 400 people in the room. And that is, for me, that is political education, because everybody counts. And when he came to power in 1992, and there is a strong, strong, strong line drawn between the 1967 war, from my perspective, to Yitzhak Rabin of 1992. And I'll tell you why. Because in 1967, when Yitzhak Rabin was chief of staff and got his honorary doctorate from the Hebrew University, he gave an amazing speech on Mount Scopus. It was 10 days after the war ended. And it's a very short speech. I'm sure it's available in English as well. And I really, truly invite you to read that. He already speaks about the price of war. And this is a man that spent all his adult life as an army man, as a soldier. Come 1992, he gives a speech in the Knesset on July 13th, 1992, that it's very, very clear that he understands, being Mr. Security, that it's not only security that is important to him, but civil security. The civil strength of Israel, its society, and its people, that is what mattered to him most of all. And that's what he did. He raised teachers' salaries. The first 3 months, he raised teachers' salaries by 70%. He froze any kind of construction in the settlements. He moved on to coming to America and straightening up things with the administration. At that time, it was President Bush, 41st Bush, and Bush Sr. And he comes to America after relationship was very, very bad, after, I don't know if any of you remember, the Madrid Convention, which was very hopeful at that time, that was supposed to give some kind of an international umbrella to a peace process. Things were very, very bad between Prime Minister Shamir and the American administration at that point. And goes to America, meets President Clinton for the first time. No chemistry. No chemistry at all. He thinks, you know, considering the relationship they have developed afterwards, it's amazing. And and he knows what he's doing. It's very, very clear. He's trying to make sure that Israel, which is as big as New Jersey, is, you know, becomes this country, whereas everyone has an equal opportunity for education, for health. National health care was legislated for the first time during that tenure. So many important things happened then. And yet, the peace process brought on such terror, advocated by Islamic Jihad, funded by Iran, that the sedition in the street, the incitement against him, first of all, it was unbearable. And we see the result of it up until today. That is probably one of the most challenging things that we have to deal with being in Knesset, be just, you know, being a citizen in Israel. Because I'm very, very concerned when I see the incitement against President Rivlin. On the other hand, even nowadays, when I look back on the past 20 or 25 years, I say to myself, there is no other country in the world that has to deal and to be challenged in such an enormous scale, such as Israel, with security issues, with social issues from all around. And we see that there are so many things that, you know, Israel has a responsibility. From my perspective, we are a strong country. I want it to continue to be Jewish and democratic. That means that we have responsibility for what's happening to us. But a lot of the things that are happening to us are not completely or entirely up to us. And there are very, very few countries in the world, if at all, that have to face these challenges all at the same time. All at the same time. Had I had a crystal ball, which I don't, I'm working on it. Had I had a crystal ball, well, let's just break it. I have no idea what Yitzhak Rabin would have thought nowadays, to be completely honest with you. I think he would not be very, very happy. I think his vision for Israel was a vision that was supposed to nurture a more just Israel for the next millennium. And sometimes when I wake up in the morning, and I really don't have the privilege to be a pessimist, but sometimes when I wake up in the morning, I'm really, really concerned about, we are 67 years old, I'm concerned about, do we have a century? We were raising, my husband is here tonight, we were raising 3 children. And I want them to be able to raise their children and their grandchildren. And it is very, very important to me. That is basically why I took the plunge eventually and followed Yitzhak Rabin's legacy, which to me is quite clear. The execution of it is much more challenging. I will finish up by something that President Clinton said last week in Tel Aviv. and I had the unique privilege of meeting him once again. And he was speaking about the fact that when you're a leader, you can choose every morning between hope and fear. And you have to be able to choose hope every time. And I think that's what Yitzhak Rabin has chosen for us. I'm trying to choose hope every hour, not every morning. So we're here, and you're on.
Thank you, Ayala. We have decided to speak, to have a short presentation, to start with 10-12 minutes presentation, and then to discuss some issues among ourselves, and then to let you join us with questions and comments. So I already have my first question to you when I finish my presentation. That is, you said.
Shall I put on my shield?
You spoke about, no, it's very simple.
Oh,
You
okay.
spoke about that you personally wanted to continue to execute his legacy. So please tell me what is his legacy later on.
Ah, absolutely.
And I will take upon
Was it
myself.
self-explanatory?
I'm not sure.
Presentation?
I'm not sure. I'm taking the academic hat rather than the personal hat, because I could tell you stories for 5 hours about my relations with Rabin. I knew him many years ago when he was the chief of staff, and I was a military correspondent. And then when he joined the Israel Labour Party, and he came back from the United States, and I was the spokesperson of the party, his office was next to me, so I became his informal teacher about Israeli politics. You'll be surprised to hear. And maybe if we'll have time, I'll talk about that later. But I want to start with really some serious matters. Rabin was assassinated twice, not once. The first time was 20 years ago. The second time was during the last 20 years. He was assassinated because he resembled one major cultural camp in Israel. And the other cultural camp saw him as the arch enemy. And therefore, a representative of the other camp assassinated him. But that was not the end of the story. The story was that the commemoration of Rabin failed, dramatically failed. That was the process of the second assassination. People were asked 2 weeks ago in a major public opinion research in Israel, what was the most important event in Israel's history that affected the democracy of Israel? The most important event. Can you guess how many people mentioned the Rabin assassination? 3.6%. You are accustomed to assassination of presidents. 4 of your presidents have been killed. There were 20 attempts to assassinate presidents. In Israel, it was the first time. And yet, only less than 4% thought that that was a major event in Israel's history. But beyond that, in that particular, the public opinion poll that was done by the Israel Democracy Institute in Jerusalem, people were asked about the assassin. Who was the assassin? Everybody should know who was the assassin in Israel. A third of the Israelis did not think that Yigal Amir was the assassin. 16% said that it wasn't him. So 90% said it's not him. And 16% said, I don't know who it was. I'm going in 2 weeks from now to a very interesting conference in Cambridge, UK, of a group that deals with with conspiracy theories, and I have a special conference on on conspiracy theories of political assassinations. So they invited me to talk about the conspiracy theories in Israel. Many people believe that Peres killed him, that the Shin Bet, the security services killed him, that he himself planned that not to be assassinated, but to be beheaded, so the public will support him and will continue to support his peace process, etc. So people, there's a very clear, organized attempt to forget Rabin. And therefore, when you ask the Israelis, that's when I ask you the question, does he have a legacy? Very many will tell you, no, he doesn't have any legacy. And if you be more specific and you ask him, what about the peace issue? After all, he was assassinated because of his attempt to bring peace to Israel, we'll say peace? That's not the topic. The topic is unity, the